So in this video we will be discussing how pure devotee, he actually cannot understand the material, the consciousness of the material people. Basically, a pure devotee has never seen Maya, whereas all of us in the material world, we live under the purview of Maya. For us, the existence is something like based on the false ego. We have a separate existence from that of the Supreme. We feel ourselves to be separate from the Supreme Personality Godhead. We enjoy pleasure through the layer of ahankara, through the layer of false ego. Whereas, if you understand, like a pure devotees, they are in the spiritual world, they're all connected to Krishna and they enjoy happiness via Krishna. So when Krishna becomes happy, they become happy. They don't have individual kind of separate happiness or separate kind of Ananda Shakti. So their Ananda Shakti comes directly from Krishna. So the point is that here in the material terms, the very thought that we have, every single thought that we have, is based on this, the concept of false ego, the concept of Maya, where we think in terms of Maya, we speak in terms of Maya, we are always talking about lust and things like that. But a pure devotee has never seen lust, he has never seen false ego, he doesn't know what is a false ego, he doesn't have a concept of a false ego. And so a pure devotee doesn't have any idea of what is suffering, material suffering or material happiness. He has never experienced material suffering or material happiness. Whereas all of us here have never experienced spiritual phenomena ever in our lives. Like, we've always been more or less only experienced material phenomena. Basically, we are colorblind to spirituality. So we see only Maya everywhere, the three modes of material nature. Whereas the pure devotee sees only Yogamaya everywhere, the three modes of spiritual nature, the Sandhini, Samvid and Ladini Shaktis. So he sees Vasudevam Sarvamiti everywhere. They see Krishna, pure devotees. They don't see any of these kind of things that we see. So their vision is totally different from our vision. Their feelings are different. They cannot understand our feelings, how we feel, our sufferings, our happiness, our pleasures from the Maya pleasures that we enjoy in this material world. A pure devotee cannot understand that. Nitya Siddha means, Nitya means constant. He constantly sees only Krishna and we constantly see only Maya. So when we see a table, we see Sattva, Raja and Tamoguna. When he sees a table, it's Sandhini, Samvita and Ladini Shakti. So it's a conjunction point of spiritual and material energies, and at that point, the pure devotee, he only sees basically Krishna's energies everywhere, and his understanding of phenomena is totally different. For example, their relationships between one living entity and another living entity in the spiritual world is, they don't derive pleasure from anything other than Krishna's pleasure. For example, if there is a living entity and there are two gopis and one gopi is supposed to be like, his kind of praises the other gopi. You look so good, but the whole idea of praising is not that I'm trying to make that gopi happy. It's not like that. It's like, the moment I say this, because that gopi is a part of Krishna and because Krishna is hearing this statement right now, and so Krishna is happy. So the whole concept down there is every single statement, every single thought that comes there in the spiritual world is to make Krishna happy. There's no individual happiness coming from an object or from a living entity or any place. There's no individual relationships directly. It's all through Krishna. It's like the other gopi is feeling happy. Oh, I'm looking good. That means, Krishna will be very happy today evening when he looks at me. So it's all about Krishna only. It's not like about their own individual separate Ladini Shakti. It doesn't flow separately. In our case, Ladini Shakti flows to the Ahankara layer as Rajoguna, and so basically it flows through that structural layer of Ahankara, and so we have an individual quota of happiness. So our thought processes it's all based on that Ahankara layer. Basically, it's because all the pleasure in the material world, all existence, all thought processes, because everything is geared towards pleasure, and because pleasure is flowing through ahankara, we think in terms of ahankara. Like I am a separate living entity having a separate quota of happiness. There in the spiritual world, it's all about I'm just connected to Krishna, and Krishna's happiness is my happiness. So it's completely different, not only in a basically a psychological level. It's not a psychological level, it's a elemental level. It's like a level of an atomic level. The pleasure itself is coming through a different medium down there in the spiritual world. So everything, the life, the way they think, everything is completely different. So what happens? How does a pure devotee feel compassion towards living entities when he cannot understand what is suffering at all? In the material suffering, a pure devotee cannot understand. He has never experienced Maya, he has never experienced material suffering. So his concept of suffering is only basically that everybody is separated from Krishna. That's the only suffering he has experienced. A pure devotee has experienced only one suffering, that everybody, when I'm separated from Krishna, I feel great pain. Actually, it is pleasure, it's ecstasy, it's the highest form of ecstasy in the spiritual world. But they feel, everybody has that the misconception in the spiritual world that it's a suffering. So, and that's required also. So these people think that that's suffering and it has to be avoided. That means we have to have Sambhoga with Krishna. We should not be in Vipralamba with Krishna. We should be in Sambhoga. But although the Vipralamba is the greatest ecstasy, they still feel that one should be in Sambhoga with Krishna. So they feel that that's a pain, and they feel that all the living entities in this material world are in separation from Krishna. That's the only suffering, that people have forgotten Krishna. That's the only suffering. So just like I've seen the suffering, the gopis, in the Gopi Gita, they say Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam, and they say that the person who's preaching your message all over the world, he's the most, because we know what is suffering. Because when you leave us in the Ras Leela, we are feeling so much suffering. And so when Prabhupada leaves you in the spiritual world and goes to preach, how great must he be? That is the greatest sacrifice that Srila Prabhupada has ever done. So they're just always thinking in terms of and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is thinking the same way. So he is in separation. So he feels that from separation, because Radharani is basically the very personification of this ecstasy of Mahabhav, separation, which is the highest pinnacle of Mahabhav. So from her comes compassion. And what is that compassion? That living entities are separated from Krishna. We have to unite the living entities to Krishna. It's not about the material sufferings of the living entities. That they cannot understand. The similar kind of thought process is there in Jiva Goswami's 92nd Anucheda in Paramatma Sandarbha, where he says that something like that. I didn't really understand that. It's something like he says that how the spiritual world people are not when they see so much suffering in the material world, they are still enjoying with Krishna. Why? Because they have no concept of what is that suffering. That's the reason why. Krishna himself doesn't have concept of what is mahamayic suffering, because only when a person comes under the influence of Mahamaya does he understand what is this suffering. So then how does a pure devotee preach? What is Prabhupada's compassion? The compassion comes from the fact that he feels that all of us in the material world are suffering in separation from Krishna. He sees the spiritual suffering. He doesn't see the material suffering. So he sees, all of them are suffering, just like I suffer so many times from Krishna's separation. So I'm going to, go and get these people back to the spiritual world, because they are in separation from Krishna. They're all suffering because of separation from Krishna. Actually, we don't even remember Krishna in the material world. We have forgotten Krishna. We are really not forgotten Krishna, because the material world is also made up of Krishna's energy everywhere. Actually, Krishna is there in a different form, in a hidden form. So it's the example is something like, there is a very big hero, and this guy, his wife is somehow, he's not interested in him. She wants to go with some other guy. So she's more interested in some kind of a CIA agent or something like that. So when I was a small kid, I had seen some movie like this. So this hero, he disguises himself like a CIA agent, and he goes there, and the wife falls in love with him. Actually, it's her own husband, but he's in a different form. So, and then he makes her life miserable as that CIA agent, So he just gives her more trouble and stuff like that. So that he wants her to love as he is in the spiritual world, like as he is in this. He doesn't want her to love an avatar of him. So basically, the material world is an avatar of Krishna. Everything, the table, the chair, the girls, the boys, the lust, everything is Krishna only. It's all part of Krishna. Without Krishna, the soul cannot be attracted to anything other than Krishna. But Krishna is actually in a hidden form in the material world. He's hiding behind matter. Actually, matter is nothing but Krishna. Arupava devahi tat pradhanatvat. So because Krishna is present as the pradhana element, everything in this material world is part of Krishna. That's why Krishna is known as Arupa sometimes, without form, because he's present everywhere. A part of his body, a part of the body, Janmad Yasya Yataha, a part of his body is the whole material world. So we love the material world, we love all of these things, but actually we are loving Krishna only. So if when a boy loves a girl, he's actually running after Krishna. So it's ultimately Krishna, but in a hidden form. It's like that the husband, but he's in a different form. And the husband doesn't want the wife to run after another man, in another form of the husband. He wants him to in the original form. So then he'll always give her trouble in some form or the other. The material world is always dukkha. So because the Lord wants us to love him in the form of Krishna, not in the form of the material realm, not in the form of all of these manifestations. So basically, we are living in a very extraordinarily complicated structure where false ego forms the basis of Ladini Shakti or a pleasure coming out of the material world. So everything happens to this identity through false ego. And we think in terms of false ego. We live in terms of false ego. We everything that we do, every single thought that we have, every single existence that we have, every single emotion that we have, everything is connected to the false ego. So the pure devotee cannot understand any of these things. So what happens here is pure devotee only finds pleasure in Krishna's pleasure. Now you will see many examples, like if you see Garudji, he eats non-veg. You might think that, oh my God, how can he's enjoying something, non-veg? No, he's eating meat, but because he's under Yogamaya, the pleasure that he's getting, his body is spiritual. He cannot enjoy meat, he cannot enjoy sex, he cannot enjoy any of these material pleasures. So the thing that he's enjoying is he's enjoying a spiritual thing. That inside his heart, Krishna is telling him that I want you to eat the snakes. So Krishna inspires him. There's a direct connection between the heart, and when Krishna inspires him to do something, he does that. And because Krishna is happy by that, by act of his, whether it is eating snakes or fighting with demons or doing whatever, it's all the same for him. As long as Krishna is happy, he's happy, and that pleasure is coming from Krishna's happiness, not from eating the snake. We think that, oh, this is happening like this. Oh, Arjuna is marrying 100 so many wives and everything. But it's because Krishna has told him to do that inside his heart for the Leela. And Arjuna is just doing that. And the pleasure is coming from Krishna's pleasure. It's not coming from enjoying with the wife, because their body is spiritual. They cannot enjoy anything material actually. So all of these people, when these people preach to us, when the spiritual master, it's like, Prabhupada himself says that, just like when a person from a foreign country comes and he sees fire and he wants to warn the locals that there is fire, but he cannot speak their tongue. There's a huge communication gap because he doesn't know their language. So what he does is he somehow frantically communicates to them basically that there is fire, and somehow the communication happens. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada also, basically, he doesn't know our language of false ego. He doesn't know what is lust, he doesn't know what is false ego. So although his dealings, it looks like Srila Prabhupada gets angry, he talks like this, he talks like that, and we superimpose our thoughts on Prabhupada, and we think that Prabhupada, he chastised that disciple, so he must have thought this disciple has false ego, so he's having this, so I'm going to chastise him. That's what our thought process is. Actually, Srila Prabhupada doesn't even know what is false ego. So he's just acting like a coward boy or like, some gopi or something like this from the spiritual world. And he's not trying to chastise anybody or anything. It's just like Krishna is inspiring him to do certain things, he's just doing it. So it's completely different from his perspective. So we are superimposing our thoughts whenever we think that Prabhupada Leela, oh, Prabhupada thought like this, Prabhupada fought like this, Prabhupada did like that, Prabhupada did like this. It's all like superimpositions that we are doing. We think that he thinks like us, but he's a Vaikuntha man. We cannot even glorify Srila Prabhupada. There's no impossible. Prabhupada himself said, my spiritual master is a Vaikuntha man, I can't even glorify. There's no point of glorify. It's not possible to glorify Srila Prabhupada because we don't know how Prabhupada thinks or what he does, because it's all totally from a different realm. It's a realm of Vaikuntha. It's a realm from which we originally were there, but we have forgotten everything of that realm. And he doesn't know anything of this realm. How we think, how do we live our lives, what is our thought process. It's totally different. It's 180-degree different. There is no communication. So somehow, just like a fire, he's trying to communicate something, and there is fire, and he cannot really communicate in our language, but somehow we get the message. Yeah, I have to go back to Godhead. The fire, the Agni material world is under fire. So somehow he's trying to communicate that. in some way, and his thought process is also different. He thinks that the fire is separation from Krishna, but for us the fire is the pain of hell, the pain of suffering, the pain of dukkhalayam, that he cannot experience. So he thinks the suffering is separation from Krishna. So he's trying to communicate us, this is separation from Krishna. That's how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, that he's thinking that I'm in separation of I'm Radharani, and I'm separation of Krishna, and all the living entities also separation from Krishna. So how can I be happy when I'm united with Krishna if all of them are not united with Krishna? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself is in that mood, and his thought process is that all of us are in separation from Krishna. Actually, all of us are kind of like, our suffering is different. Our suffering is, we are suffering because of the material suffering, which cannot be understood by Krishna or his pure devotee. They cannot really understand. When Arjuna told Krishna, Ishubhi Pratyotsyami Pujarao Arisudhana, you are Madhusudhana, you are Arisudhana. Will you kill your demons? Will you kill your own grandfather? You're telling me to kill my Bhishma. Bhishma is my friend. I mean, he's my loved one. Right now he's my enemy, but he was my friend. How can I give him torture? So Krishna says there is no torture. The material world is no torture. So the question is similar to Krishna, like Arjuna asking Krishna that all these living entities, they are also coming from the spiritual world. They are like Bhishma. They were your good friends. They loved you so much, but now they have become your enemies. Somehow they have become averse to you, and they're just living their lives separate from you. So why are you making this world a dukkhalayam ashashvatam? How do you justify that? Katham. How do you justify? Katham bhishmam asaham sanki. Your loved ones, they are also your loved ones. So how do you justify? Will you do these things to your own grandfather or to your own maternal spiritual master or something like that? If yes, then justify. Krishna says, yeah, I can justify. There is no suffering. Krishna cannot understand suffering. Because he has never experienced Maya. He's always in Yogamaya. Yogamaya never gives suffering. And Krishna is a lord of the Yogamaya. He can never be kicked by Maya. He cannot be suffered. So similarly, pure devotees, they don't suffer like how we suffer. They never experience pleasure, pain of the material existence. So their preaching is more or less is like, they have on a different level. Our understanding is on a different level. Somehow or the other, just like there is a fire and somehow there is a communication done, even though the person is trying to say something and the other person doesn't understand, but he just does get the idea that I have to get out of this place. So somehow or the other, this thing happens, and then finally the spiritual master convinces the disciple to get out of this material world. So this is one of the... So another thing is, when Vyasadeva saw in his samadhi, he saw bhakti yogena manasi samyak pranihite male apashyat purusham purnam mayam chatadabashrayam. So he saw that basically he saw Krishna, he saw Maya, and he saw the living entities under the control of Maya, and Maya hiding apashraya. Apashraya means hiding behind Krishna. Prabhupada translates it like that. So Krishna cannot see Maya. He's like the sun. He cannot see Maya. He can never experience Maya. Wherever he sees, Yogamaya comes up, because Yogamaya is the source of Mahamaya. So Sandini Samvit Ladini is the source of Sattva Guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. Pradhana comes from Sandini. So everything is basically spiritual energy. So when Krishna looks at the spiritual energy, he doesn't see Maya Sita, he sees Sita. So when Ram looks at Sita, he sees Sita, but when Ravan looks at Sita, he sees Maya Sita, a different version of Sita. So when we look at the table, when we look at the chair, when we look at a girl, we see the Maya version of this whole thing. We see Sattvaguna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. But when Krishna sees, he sees Yogamaya. In a similar way, it is said that there is no mention of internal potency of Lord Krishna there separately. Neither is there a mention of pure devotees of Lord Krishna in that verse, if you see. That is my addition. So Vyasadeva didn't see the internal potency separately. Why? Because when he saw Krishna, he saw Maya, he saw the living entities under the control of Maya. So the question comes, didn't he see the spiritual potency, Sandani Samvit Ladini Shakti? No, Jiva Goswami explains that he didn't see that separately, because when you see fire, heat and light is already there. You don't mention fire, I saw fire, heat and light. We say, I just saw fire, because heat and light are implied. When I say I saw moon and moonlight, we don't say that, because moon light is implied inside moon. So similarly, the Shaktis or internal potency of Lord Krishna, they are like basically like the heat and the light of, and Krishna is like fire. Vastavamatra vastu. Vastu is Krishna and Vastavam is these energies, and they are integral part of Krishna. Now this part is understood, but there's a very more secret down here. So actually Vyasadeva didn't see pure devotees also. It's not about internal potency like Radharani, like Samvit Shakti, Sandhini, and not like that. He didn't even see pure devotees, jivas, who are pure. He didn't see them. That means they were also part of that same internal potency of Lord Krishna. You see? So even Prabhupada was there, but he was a part of the internal potency of Lord Krishna. So he was identified himself as part of Krishna. So he was in the package of Krishna. So only the living entities who were averse to Krishna were identified separately. The separation was there, and Vyasadeva could see them as separate, and he could see Maya was attacking them. So Maya was not attacking any of the pure devotees in any of the form, and these pure devotees were integrally integrated to Krishna, basically. So that part also explains some very important concept. It explains Nitya Siddha and Nitya Baddha. Nitya doesn't mean that we are eternally in the material realm, or we were. So when we become Nitya Siddhas, when we again, go back to the spiritual world, we are no longer being harassed by Maya. Then what do we become? We go into the internal potency. So some people say that Nitya Siddha those are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternal. But actually Nitya means constant. They constantly see only Krishna, and we constantly see only Maya. We are colorblind to Krishna, they are colorblind to Maya. That's what it means, Nitya Siddha, Nitya. So if it's eternality, then what after we become pure devotees, do we remain in a separate Tataksha Shakti? So then he should have seen a Tataksha Shakti, right? He didn't see a Tataksha Shakti. What he saw was a living entity who was separated from Krishna, being beaten by Maya, and a living entity. There was no other living entity. It's only Krishna, because everybody who's a pure devotee is part of Krishna's family, is a part of Krishna's whole thing. Krishna includes everything. So there is no separate energy, Tataksha Shakti. There is no separate. Tataksha, Tatastha, or borderline. So there is no borderline Shakti in the spiritual world, or once you go into the spiritual world, there is no Tatastha Shakti. It's not like, you go back there, but you're still a part of Tatastha Shakti. They are a part of different Shaktis. So living entity, jivas, Nitya Siddhas are different. It's not like that. Only when you are averse to Krishna, this concept of Tatastha comes. That you are like neither, you cannot be a potency of Lord Krishna like Maya or internal potency. And you are a jiva, but you are separate. You are separate from Krishna. So then the concept Tatastha Shakti comes. Tatastha Shakti is those jivas who are separate from Krishna, basically. But when they unite with Krishna, they are no longer Tatastha Shaktis. They are part of the internal potency of Lord Krishna. So originally we were part of the internal potency of Lord Krishna, but only during the realm of this material existence, when we have we live in the form of we come to the shore of this material realm, Tatastha, the shore, where the internal potency is there acting on us. We can take shelter of her, but we are not taking shelter of her, and the external potency is influencing us, and we are right in the cusp where two Shaktis are fighting over us, basically. Krishna is trying to drag us back to the spiritual world, and we are so this uncertain state of false ego or existence where we live in the material world. Jai Subhadra Devi ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. This is the part where we can say that we all came from this Tatastha Shakti, because as long as we continue this cycle of birth and death and the material realm, and as long as the universe dissolve and then the new universes, then this Shakti, we all go into the Tatastha. So we are still in that Tatastha stage. Even though the universes are getting dissolved and destructed and constructed and reconstructed, so we are still Tatastha. But the moment we go back to the spiritual world, there is no identification of Tatastha. Vyasadeva didn't see any spiritual jiva who were pure devotees but were Tatastha. There was nothing. Pure devotees are never Tatastha. Tatastha. They're never there. Pure devotees always internal potency. So he only saw them. Only those living entities which are beaten by Maya were seen separately by Vyasadeva. So this is one concept also that we have to understand about Nitya Siddha. We were all Nitya Siddhas. It's not about, just like Srila Prabhupada says, we are all from the spiritual world. We are all part of the internal potency. But we decided and we came here, and now we are Tatastha. So now when the cycle repeats, when the universe is dissolved, we still remain Tatastha. And from the Tatastha Shakti, we again come back to the material world, again and again, from Tatastha. Because we are all part of this structure where the universe is, when we enter Mahavishnu's body, we still remain as a separate energy, a separate potency, who want to enjoy the material world. So inside the body of Vishnu, everything is spiritual. We are also spiritual, but we still remain separate. We remain in an energy which is separate, tatastha. That is what it means. It doesn't mean that we are constitutionally from a different. We are all Satchitananda, and every Krishna himself is Satchitananda, but Krishna is the source of Satchitananda, Karana Upadhi Ishvara, and we are the product of Satchitananda, basically product of Satchitananda. So Krishna is the source of Satchitananda. Upadhi also means defining characteristics. Adhi, that which defines, that which controls all the things which are nearby. Upadhi. So Upadhi also means defining characteristic, or not only the delimiting characteristic, which is generally used by the Mayavadis, and we also understand in the material world there are many Upadhis which actually define us, and Sarva Upadhi Vinirmuktam, we have to remove those Upadhi. But the spiritual, also Upadhi has many meanings, and one of the meanings is defining characteristic, and that is Krishna is the Karana Upadhi. He is the source of Satchitananda, and we are the product of Satchitananda. And Sat is Sandini, Chit is Samvit, and Ananda is Ladini, and Parasar Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. So this whole concept that there are only three energies, all other energies, Natat Samasya Bhyadikascha Darshate. Na bhyadikash, there is nothing more or nothing better than samas, a combination. Not bhyadikash, and if you see that verse, like natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate natat samascha bhyadikascha darshate parasya shaktir vividhaiva shruyate swabhaviki jnana bala kriyacha. In this particular shloka I can understand, first thing is Krishna doesn't have need to work. He doesn't have any need to work, because Krishna is, all his energies do everything, the whole universe, everything, the destination. He is the source. He's the source, is the destination as well. There is no reaching the destination, because everything in the universe is nothing but a combination of his three energies. And how na bhyadikash means nothing better, and bhyadikash means better than something, nothing more than what, samas, a combination of that, tat, of what, swabhaviki jnana bala and kriya. Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. It is heard of the various of these various Shaktis, Parasya Shakti, or Vividhaiva, or various Shaktis is heard. Shruyate. What? That is Darshate. It is seen. It is heard that it is heard of the various Shaktis. It is heard that it is seen that there is nothing better than a combination of Swabhaviki Jnana Bala, that they are nothing, that they, tat, they are nothing better than na bhyadikash, nothing better than a combination, samascha, which is a combination. Samas means combination, combine, a combination of what? Swabhaviki Jnana Bala and Kriya. Nothing more than that. So basically, if you see, there is nothing special like Tatastha Shakti or something. There is the internal, and the external is just is a transformation of the internal. It's nothing but a transformation of the internal. Yeah, they are different. They have different moods and stuff like that. Parvati is different from Yogamaya. So there is a mood change, but actually it's the same personality who just transforms into a different personality. So there is internal and there is external. And when we rebel against the Supreme Lord, then we come into this borderline situation, which is known as neither in the internal nor the external kind of situation. It's like very, very strange kind of a middle path that we choose. So only after a rebellion, not before the rebellion. So in the spiritual world, we are all with Krishna. We are all enjoying as internal potency. We have one unit integrated. There is no. So there's of course the internal potency in terms of like Radharani and all these Shaktis. They are totally different. They're infinite, like Krishna himself. So, but then there is Jiva, who's a small little fragmental portion. So, what happens is there's the fire, the source of these energies, and there is the energies, and these energies they combine into living entities. When the three energies Sat, Chit, and Anand, they combine into each other, they form various living entities, basically, and they are already existing eternally. That's it. There is nothing special. There's no special energy which is like neither external nor internal or tatastha or some special energy, and from that energy we are coming. It's just a nomenclature that is used to define the living entities who are in the rotation cycle of the material world. So they have not yet gone back to the spiritual world, and they're just rotating the material world. So they are that Shakti Tatastha who are used to just define such kind of, it's a nomenclature. It's not some kind of a different potency, a fourth potency or something like that. There is no fourth potency. It's the same potency, internal potency. If we are part of the internal potency, Prabhupada says that, and we're just basically, because of a free will, which are rotating, and so a nomenclature is used to define that we are part of this particular category of living entity. It's a category basically. It's not a constitutional energy. Tatastha is not a separate energy from which living entities are separately created, because they are also Sat, Chit and Ananda, pure Sat, Chit and Ananda. Sandini, Samvid and Ladini. It's the same, qualitatively same thing as Krishna. He's the Karana, we are the Karya. That's the only reason. Karana Upadi Krishna, Karya Upadi, Karana Upadi Ishvara, Karya Upadi Jiva. So that's the only difference. That's the only constitutional difference that lasts forever. Every other things like Tatastha and everything, these are just terminologies which are used at a particular juncture of time to define how the living entity who have rebelled against Krishna, now they belong to this category known as Tatastha. Either they can go back or they can stay here in the material world. So that category is Tatastha category. And internal category is when they go back. External category is the material realm itself. So because they are sometimes inside internal, sometimes they're external, and keeps on rotating sometimes. That's the reason why they're sometimes dragged by the internal, sometimes dragged by the external. So depending upon what is the influence that is acting on them, they are sometimes known as Tatastha in terms like that. So that's the only understanding.